Hey guys, I'm just going to make a video going over how to use Photoshop to make a low poly portrait. So first thing you should do is probably go into Finder and go into Documents and make an Illustration 2 folder. If you don't know how to make a folder, just go to File, while in Finder, go to File, New Folder. And then just go ahead and label that folder Illustration 2, and then make another folder within there by going to File, New Folder, rename it. Rename it Photoshop Low Poly Portrait. Here's my subject that I've chosen. So I went ahead and put my subject in that folder that those folders that we just created in our document. So now that we have that in our documents area, in the classroom folder and inside of that we have our project folder, and inside of that we have this JPEG or PNG file of our subject. We can actually launch Photoshop. You can go to Finder, Applications, Photoshop, and double click on that to open it. So let's do File, Open, when in Photoshop, and let's go to the Sammy Dog file within our project folder, push Open. So here it is. So we want to crop this. This particular image is not cropped close enough around the face. We really want to kind of zoom in on the face with this project. So I clicked on the crop tool. Let's just drag in these bars to get relatively close to the face. And then push return. Let's do Command 0 on our keyboard to zero out the canvas. We can unlock this layer too. It automatically locks, but we don't need it to be locked. Also, maybe you go into Windows Workspace, make sure you're in Essentials. That's a good one to be in. Make sure you have your Layers panel open. If you go into Window Layers, you can get that to show up. Make sure your toolbar, you can expand it by clicking here. So you can see the same kind of toolbar that I have on my document. But anyway, definitely the Layers panel needs to be open. You can have the Properties panel open too. If you don't have that panel, go to Window, Properties. Color, these kinds of things don't necessarily need to be open. Mostly just the Layers panel, and just remember to expand your toolbar too. Okay, so now that we've cropped our image, we can actually straighten the head out now because she's a little bit tilted. Her head's a little tilted. So let's use the ruler tool. It's the fourth one down on the left. It's actually underneath the eyedropper tool. So if you click and hold down, you can get to the ruler tool, and then we can click and drag from the chin while holding down the whole time, and then let up when you get to the forehead. And then if we go to image rotation, and go to arbitrary, so we went to image rotation, arbitrary. I'm going to rotate the canvas so that I can straighten her head out. And actually clockwise is great, and it will automatically put that angle in there that you need to rotate your image by. So let's go ahead and just push OK. And that's rotated it. And it looks a little goofy right now, but that actually did straighten her out. I'm going to actually go ahead and click on the crop tool and crop it in a little bit closer. Move this over. Okay. That's looking pretty. And then push return on the keyboard to make that stick. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now we can actually split her head in half. This is something that you would only do on the animal, on an animal subject. If you have a human, I would suggest skipping this step. But let me show you the steps. So you grab the rectangular marquee tool, click and drag over roughly half of the canvas. I'm not perfectly down the middle, so I can actually move this over till I'm a little bit closer to being down, straight down the middle of her face, which is about right there, I would say. Okay, and then if we do a Command J, that will create a copy of our selection in a new layer. Okay, next we're actually going to make a grid that our triangles that we end up drawing over our image will snap to. And you'll kind of see what I'm talking about if you don't understand it quite yet. So in order to do that, let's go to Photoshop, Preferences, and then Guides, Grid, and Slices. If you're on a PC, you're going to have to go to Edit, Preferences, but on a Mac, it's under the Photoshop menu. So let's go here. Let's go to the grid area here. Let's make it maybe this bright green color, something that will stand out over the top of our image. Let's change this to the dotted one. I find that that shows up a little bit better. You'll see what I'm talking about once we make this. Guideline let's put this on pixels, and let's make this like every maybe 17 pixels, and subdivision should be 1. So if we get that set in the grid section, that should be good. So go ahead and push OK. So as you can see, we're not seeing the grid at all, so we need to go to View, Show, and then Grid. And now we can see it. We might actually have to make it even smaller than this. So we can always go back into Preferences, Grids, Guides, and Slices, and like let's make this actually more like let's make this like every 7 pixels and push OK. And I think it's because my image is pretty low resolution. If you have a higher resolution, then you probably won't have to go back in and do it again and make the number smaller. So just make sure you have quite a few grids or quite a few dots over your image. Okay, and then let's go to View and make sure Snap is checked. Mine's already checked, so I don't need to check it again. Okay, so let's turn off this background layer. So we have half the head here. Let's Command plus to zoom in. And as you can see, it's kind of hard to see here on the screen, honestly, but if we use the Move tool, we can move our image over so that it's lining up nicely with our grid. Let's do Command 0 so we can zoom back out. Okay, next we're actually going to work with the Polygonal Lasso tool, which is underneath the Move tool. It might be underneath the Lasso tool for you. I've already been on it, so it looks like this. Let's go ahead and zoom in on an area where you want to start. Basically, we're going to be using the Polygonal Lasso tool to create small triangles, which will make up the whole image. And we're going to use a combination of small triangles and large triangles. The smaller triangles will be good for the detail areas of the image, such as the eye, some of the more detailed areas that you want to get more detail. And then the larger triangles will be better for areas that are less detailed. So I'm going to identify an area where I can draw my first triangle. So we're going to click down 3 times with this over the grid. I'm going to create a triangle here. When I complete my triangle, I'll get it like a little circle icon next to the Polygonal tool. So that will create a selection. And then if we go to Filter at the top menu, Blur, and Average, that will give us the average color of that area. So if I do Command D, you can see it's really actually hard to see here because it's so similar to the image that we actually have. But if we go to Filter, Blur, Average, it just makes an average color for this area. Command D on our keyboard to deselect. And basically you can do that over your whole image. You can make your triangles larger than this. You don't have to you don't have to make them this small the whole way, but since this is a more detailed area, I am going to make it smaller. But you can use a combination of small and large, just kind of depending on your image. So I'm actually going to make a slightly larger triangle here, because this is pretty much all the same color and value. And make sure you get this triangle made before we start the next step, which we're going to create an action. And actions are things in Photoshop that help to automate the process of what we're doing. So let's go to Window, Actions. That'll open up the Actions panel. Let's go to this menu up here in the upper right hand corner. Let's go to New Set and name it Low Poly. Push OK. And then go to New Action and let's name that LP. And then now we can push Record. Make sure you have drawn this triangle and have an active selection on your image before you start this process. So let's go ahead and push record. Oh, actually, we need to change this to F2, sorry. So the function key that we press will be F2, push record. It's telling me that the F2 key is already the cut command in Photoshop. I don't use the F2 very much to cut anything in Photoshop, so that's okay. And now it's actually recording. It's not recording how much time it takes us to do anything, so we don't need to rush, but it is recording our actions that we make. So let's go to filter, blur, average, and then Command D, and then let's stop our action. So that stopped the recording. Basically that recorded the filter, blur, average, and then the Command D after it. Okay, so let's try again and we'll make a new triangle. Maybe I'll make one that's not in such a obvious area here. So now that I have that selected, we can use our shortcut command F2 to complete the action that we just did. If you have a MacBook Pro or a laptop on a Mac, just push the FN button in the lower left corner to bring up your F2 button, and then just push F2. And it's actually working really well. I'm not making complete triangles here, but I'm just using the straight lines, which will work. Not everything has to be a triangle. So I'm going to push F2 again. So now I can begin really filling in my image, and it's working pretty fast, as you can see. It's creating averages of the area that I have selected. And I can just go through my whole image and try and make triangles going over the whole image. Some bigger than others. You can kind of experiment and see how this works. If you make a mistake or you make a selection that you're not happy with, you can always do a Command Z to undo. And as you can see right here, there's actually a gap in between these two triangles here, and you don't want to have gaps. So definitely, if you have a gap, just redraw your triangle and do it again, and that will actually fill in the gaps for you. So try not to get any gaps in your image if possible. Okay, so now that we have that process sort of automated, we can actually clip the image out from the background. So just make sure you turn off this layer under here. And then using the Polygonal tool in layer 1, we can actually go around our subject with straight lines and try and clip out all of the background that we can get. And we have that Snap to Grid system still in place here, so that's going to kind of affect the lines that we make. But as long as they're all straight, which they will be, this process should be fine. I'm going to go ahead and do it, pause the video, and then I'll show you when I've got my whole selection made. So as you can see, I've made a selection with the Polygonal tool all the way around my subject. And so if we go to select inverse, we can get the background selected, and then let's just push delete on the keyboard. And that's looking pretty good. So let's do Command D to deselect that. Now obviously you're going to want to finish up the rest of this in triangles, large and small. Remember to use the smaller triangles in the more detailed areas, and then maybe larger triangles in less detailed areas. I will show you how to use Photopea on the same project in the next video, but let's go ahead and do a file, save, and let's save it as a Photoshop document or a .psd. I'm going to name it the same thing. And then, yeah, as long as we have that Photoshop document, we are good to go. So in the next video, we will pick up where we left off, but we're going to use Photopea for those of you that don't have Photoshop at home.